This is the Pitino Show, hosted by Richard Pitino and Paul Fritschner, presented by Deer Park Roofing.
Welcome into another episode of the Pitino Show, presented by Deer Park Roofing. I'm Paul Fritschner, alongside the athletic director here at Xavier University and a vice president of the university, Greg Christopher. Greg, it's great to be here with you. And last year we did a podcast very similar to this. You always like to do a state of the state, as you call it, a kind of a state of the union of the athletic department, where things are right now. Last year we did it in podcast form. Felt like we got some pretty good feedback on that. So we said, you know what? Let's do it again. And here we are in the middle of September as we record this, and an opportunity to catch up on a very eventful last few months and year, really, since the last time we talked.
Yeah, let's run it back. Good to see you. Actually, last time I think we saw each other, we were just talking about this. You were working 16, 17-hour days out at the tennis center. So
that's right. That's right.
You survived.
We survived the heat. The cameras got a little melty. We were talking about that. Everything. There was a very hot 2 weeks, but proud of the work that we did at the 1831 Media Network to be able to put that documentary on for the tennis tournament, and only elevating, and I'm sure we can talk about this, what the facilities are like around this area. And the tennis team here at Xavier going to be able to utilize those facilities now up there at the Leonard Family Tennis Center. So just elevating everything around here in the area. But let's get started. We mentioned tennis, so I think that's a great place to start here, talking about the success of athletics and the championships that the program was able to bring home. So we're going to get into a lot today. We're going to talk about some of the things that are happening in the landscape of college athletics right now. We're going to talk about the basketball teams here at Xavier. We're going to talk about all of those different topics. But to reflect back to last year and the success that the teams had, tennis was one of multiple Xavier teams that were able to bring home some hardware here to the athletic department.
You're right, Paul. I thought we had a pretty solid year last year overall, and I've said this before. When you've got 19 sports, you never will get all 19 kind of rowing in the same direction at the same time. But maybe most notably, we had those two Big East championships with women's golf and women's tennis. Then we had another NCAA tournament team in men's basketball. And then we had two, and I'm not saying these are the only two that had great seasons as well, but two who just missed the tournament, with Billy O'Connor in baseball. And then Dean and the women's soccer team just fell outside the tournament bracket. And I think there's a lot of people in the country thought that it was pretty egregious they were left out. But again, I thought a solid year for our various teams.
When you have conversations with Dean and Billy, and I've talked to both of them pretty extensively about that feeling of getting left out, especially when you feel like you've done enough, right? You look at Billy's schedule and the murderer's row that he puts in front of himself every single season. As a coach like that, where you feel like you schedule, you feel like you check the boxes, what more can you do outside of just winning games to maybe advocate for themselves? Or what is it, do you think, that separates making the tournament and not?
Those are difficult conversations, and because I agree with exactly what you said, Paul. That those two coaches did exactly what they needed to do from a scheduling. They controlled what they could control as far as the scheduling and the approach, and then you've got some dynamics both within the strength of the league, that could have affected. You have to take care of business on the field in both of those cases. And the reality is, in a league like the Big East, that's not a Power Four league, your margin for error is just this much. And having been in a selection room before, it's still subjective. It's human decisions being made. So it's tough conversations with the coaches. It's even tougher with the student athletes.
Sure.
And that's where I feel for the young women and the young men in both of those cases.
Men's basketball last season put together a heck of a February and into March to be able to put themselves in a position to make the NCAA tournament. You just mentioned that. The team gets up to Dayton, and regardless of what happened over the next week within the program after that game up in Dayton, that should not at all take away from what happened inside UD Arena. And I think what I would say one of the best recent memories or maybe all-time memories of a sporting, and I say this as somebody that has been around this program for a while, and I've mentioned this on the air before, that was truly one of the best atmospheres I have ever been inside at an event, sports, whatever. There was a palpable feeling within thousands of people in that arena as that second half transpired that we're watching that game go down, and I know it's such a cherished memory for everybody that was there and watched it.
The juxtaposition that so many of us have talked about, for those of us who were there in, what was it, 13 or 14?
I believe it was 14.
So 14,
I believe it was 14.
The first four that we played in. You fast forward to 2025, the next time we're playing in the first four, how different the feel was. Both the feel around the team or teams, but then also the energy in the building.
Yeah.
It felt like a road game in 2014 there. The entire city of Dayton was against us. And then instead, this past spring, it felt like a home game.
It did.
And the energy and the excitement around it. That was a remarkable evening for the basketball team.
It's been covered extensively, obviously, what happened over the next week or so. Sean Miller leaves to go to Texas. You make the decision to hire Richard Pitino from New Mexico. He becomes a head coach here at Xavier. And I want to get your thoughts on the transition and what the next few months have looked like for Richard and getting him here and settled in Cincinnati, bringing his family here, and really taking the reins as the head coach of this program.
So, Paul, it probably came in what I would say parts, and the absolute first priority was the team. Because he, for the most part, knew the staff makeup right from the get-go. But we've got such a unique situation, as you know, it's never happened in Xavier history, where we have 0 returners.
Yep.
As far as scholarship players and minutes on the court. And so assembling an entire team, that took up a chunk of time in itself. Then the rest of the summer has been spent in what I would call the transition around Xavier Nation. So because Richard was in some ways an unknown commodity to our fan base compared to at least the coaches that have been here since I've been here, Travis and then Sean, there was a lot more intentionality around getting him in front of our alums and donors. So I'm not sure how Richard would say it, but I think we wore him out as far as breakfast, lunches, and dinners and various events. And so he's ready to get focused on basketball at this point. And I know he's excited.
And the more I talk to him and the more I get the vibe of the priorities, right? It's constantly a push for NIL, right? To expand the resources that this program has to be able to drive the talent and the growth of the program through NIL and promoting that growth. And you mentioned that right there, putting him in front of the right people to be able to do that over the last few months. It feels like that's been the priority.
That has been, because the reality is, as you just said, we have to grow the resources. We're not in a chopped liver position, but we're also not at the top of the Big East. And the resources that we have to work with have always affected the program. They probably more directly affect the program today than ever before in college athletics.
College athletics, it feels like, is just an ever-changing. Every day you could wake up and see a new ruling or a new article or somebody saying that they're filing a fresh lawsuit in a different state or whatever it might be. And I think the most interesting thing to me about all of this, because you can get lost in the weeds of the finances and all of that, is just trying to simply figure out, what rules do you follow? What guidelines are you supposed to adhere to? Because one might say one thing and one might say the other. How do you approach that process right now? How do you lead those coaches?
It's hard, and I'm proud of our coaches, our staff, and in how we navigate it. It's constant communication, and trying to get the right people around a table and then be nimble in shifting as the rules or the landscape shifts. there's also a bit of a mindset of excitement, trying to keep, a half full, like this. I believe this is an exciting time. It's really cool to be working in this environment and trying to help an organization through a really disruptive time. I can also see and have seen sometimes it's time for people who want to go under their desk. and you can't have that mindset in this environment. So that's the bigger part. But there is no doubt we are in a period of complete disruption in college athletics, probably higher education as a whole, which could be a whole different podcast. But I think Xavier's well positioned. I think the Big East is well positioned to navigate this next stretch.
So the House settlement was approved over the summer. What does that mean? We constantly hear that the Big East is in position to thrive off of that settlement because they don't have football to worry about. So how does the House settlement approval affect the Big East from your eyes, and how have you already seen it start to play out?
Yeah, in its simplest terms, I think what House means to us, and it's certainly more complicated than this, is that we are now sharing revenue directly with our student athletes. And for Big East schools and for Xavier, obviously, the two basketball teams are the priority, and that's where revenue will be shared because that's where we generate our revenue. So that's how we made that decision. There's some other decisions that come with House, like roster limits. But back to your previous question, as far as how do we navigate this, that sharing of revenue comes down to this conversation, and that really centers on do we have the resources in place to share the revenue with the student athletes?
And when fans right now they hear revenue sharing, paying directly, right? I think the constant feedback you get is the old days, right? It used to be you went to a school for 4 years and you got your degree and you graduated from there and you had pride in the place that you played for and all of those things. And I'm not saying that the players don't have pride for playing for their school, but there's no denying that it's different now than it was even 7-8 years ago. So how have you been able to kind of reconcile some of those differences? Because I asked that question, and I know I'm talking a lot here. I want to hear from you on this, but I asked that because I think you make a good point, what you said before, where it's an exciting time to be a part of this, because if you truly just look at college basketball as a whole, I don't know if the sport has ever been better from a talent perspective. The incentives that both international players and professional players have to either come back or to join the college ranks has never been higher.
Right.
But the stability and the retention at each individual school and getting to learn about your team and getting to effectively grow with the players has never been harder, I think.
That's fair.
So how do you reconcile those two things, do you think?
So the long-term answer is I don't know, because what we don't know is how fans will react if the industry doesn't figure out the stability piece.
Yep.
The idea that players can leave every year. I'm worried about that. Could be a little bit longer conversation later. I have yet to talk with rarely does the idea that, college athletics is, I think, about a $1.4 billion business every year. I haven't heard hardly anyone say, the players don't deserve a portion of it. So that at least I haven't heard too many arguments against. They deserve a portion of the revenue. What the problem people seem to have with, and I struggle with too, we all struggle with, is the structure, the process, the uncertainty, the changing rules. And each year of NIL and now with House, it does seem like the guardrails get a little better. So this, again, it's a tired analogy, but I continue to use it. We are building this plane as we're trying to fly it. And I think, Xavier, I think we've navigated this NIL era so far, 3-4 years, whatever it is, effectively okay. We've had some missteps. We probably aren't exactly where we want to be, but we also haven't failed. And so how can we stay on that path, but also let's take a step forward? Because I do think there are going to be programs that win through this.
Do you think the way that it's going right now, when you talk about retention, do you see guardrails being put in place eventually on the transfer portal where maybe it's a one-time transfer? Do you kind of go back to the old way a little bit? Have you heard any conversations about that?
I think there will be I think there has to be something, because otherwise, one of the things the NCAA has done really well over, say, 20 or 30 years is graduating student athletes.
Yep.
And helping the graduation rates for student athletes to go like this. If you can transfer year after year after year, I worry that graduation rates are going to start headed back down the hill, and that'll get people's attention real fast. So the opportunity for multi-year contracts or some sort of stability has to come with either the SCORE Act or a next step. Now, that said, I also talk about this a fair amount, and people I don't think a lot of fans realize this. I understand I have this image of freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, the 4 years.
Yep.
Don't underestimate the impact a place like Xavier can have on a young woman or a young man for just a year. Xavier is Xavier, and you know it very well. It's a special place because of the attention from faculty, the full development focus, of a place like Xavier. I'm not going to name names, but if you talk to the young women and the young men who have come here as transfers or grad students, the meaningful connection they have, the development, some of the life-changing experiences they've had, that can still happen. And it doesn't have to be the traditional 1, 2, 3, 4 years. That can happen in just a year or two.
Deer Park Roofing has been providing elite service for homes and businesses since 1996 and leads the industry in professionalism, quality, and responsiveness. So whether your needs are residential or commercial, Deer Park can handle any job and ensure it's done right. Deer Park's motto is protect what's important, and what's important to you is important to Deer Park Roofing. Visit deerparkroofing.com today. deerparkroofing.com.
Talk about academic success, I do want to ask you this real quick. Xavier, I think sometimes it maybe gets lost in the shuffle because the fans are watching what's happening on the field or on the court, but Xavier's had a lot of academic success within their athletic ranks as well.
We continue to have that and still be proud of that. And you're right. Look, the attention is you got to win games, and that's what we do. But our student athletes are a tremendous group. There's about 310, I think it is, student athletes, and clearly still higher GPAs, higher graduation rates than the overall student body, and very proud of that. Yep.
So we talked about the House settlement, maybe what that means for Xavier going forward. But what happened to the final 2%?
So final 2% was the collective, and under the old rules where you raised money and it went to a collective, that third-party organization, final 2% then paid the student athletes. Now, because of the House settlement and Xavier paying directly, almost all of the fundraising we're doing is going to the university for the revenue sharing. We have decided for now to keep final 2% open. We've got a couple of business entities, or business relationships that, whether it's some partnerships, Fifth Third Bank, other business opportunities, the trucking. I think there was the bourbon, last year or the year before. So for now, we've kept final 2% open just because you don't want to close it down too early, not knowing what the landscape's going to look like. But for the most part, again, the fundraising that's going toward revenue sharing now going through the university. Can
you give some clarity as to where people should be directly donating their money if they want to support the student athletes, if they want to maybe give to NIL, all of that? Because for a couple of years now, everybody's been trained to hear final 2%, give the money there. It still exists, but you're talking about giving money to the university. I think a lot can get lost in the weeds there.
Yeah, it's all through All for One, and the fund, which I think people are pretty used to hearing, is the Basketball Excellence Fund, and that's been around for probably 20 plus years,
Yep.
and supports the basketball programs. And so anybody who's supporting revenue sharing or basketball, it all goes to the Basketball Excellence Fund.
One last thing on this, because again, I think this is something I get a lot, and sometimes I have a hard time explaining it. There's the $20.5 million number that we hear from
Yes.
the House settlement that schools have to distribute in revenue sharing. But a lot of times when you hear SEC or Big Ten, these football conferences, they'll say they're giving a certain percentage. Maybe it's 12 million, 13 million, 15 million, whatever it is to football. And then the other sports have to divvy up the rest. Let's say you max out your $20.5 million number. Can you get more through NIL? Could you distribute more through NIL? Is that $20.5 million? That's capped. That's the only thing you can give the athletes. How does that all?
So as I understand it, and if Leslie Fields, our compliance director, is here, she might, wordsmith what I'm about to say. But the bottom line is schools, our cap is $20.5 million. Without a football program, Xavier's never going to hit that cap. I don't think any Big East school is going to hit that cap. So if you're Ohio State and 20.5 you deem is not enough, for your programs, that's where, whether it's collective, whether it's marketing agreements directly with companies, so yes, other opportunities, but the school is capped at 20.5.
Got it. Okay. Appreciate that. Because I'll tell you what, sometimes you get the tweets, you get somebody coming up to you on the concourse, and I'm going, I can talk ball, but sometimes you get into the numbers, and I wasn't a math major. It's better to ask somebody else. So tell me more about the College Sports Commission, because that's something else that has come up now in the last couple of months.
That came out of House.
Yep.
And as far as what I would say their job is, here's how I would describe it. They've been set up as the entity that's a clearinghouse for this institutional NIL, the $20.5 million cap that we all have. So those deals are the outside deals then beyond the 20.5 or any outside deals at all are now the clearinghouse going through the College Sports Commission. They also are a new enforcement mechanism, to essentially make sure everybody's playing well together in the sandbox. I do think it's going to be a fascinating interaction because we now have an industry, if you want to call us that in some ways has, I'm going to loosely call it, two governing bodies, the NCAA and the College Sports Commission. So that dynamic is going to be interesting to watch.
The SCORE Act, you've mentioned that a couple of times. Again, maybe new terminology to people that now through the offseason, all of these things happening at one time. Tell us more about the SCORE Act.
So the SCORE Act has been introduced in Congress. And if you go back in time, the intent of the NCAA or the hope of the NCAA has always been, we need the House settlement to provide some level of stability and kind of a framework for the ability to share revenue with student athletes. But it probably doesn't go far enough. And the only entity that can help as far as solving the employment issue and some of the antitrust safe harbor questions is Congress. For Congress to wave its wand and say student athletes are, in essence, a special class. They're not employees. They're not just students. They are this. Comes with these rights and these protections. So it's, again, I'm way oversimplifying it, but that in essence is what's happening with the SCORE Act. It's been introduced in the House. Greg Landsman is actually on the committee that is hearing and discussing, I think this week even, the SCORE Act. This is as far as any legislation around college athletics has gotten. Can it get to the finish line? We'll find out in the coming months.
One thing that I think everybody agrees on, in fact, Rob Doster did a poll the day that all of this news was breaking, and 94% of people that voted in this poll on Twitter said that the NCAA tournament should not expand. And Greg, I'll tell you, I don't know if there is anything in the world that you could get 94% of people to agree on right now. But one thing that pretty much unites this entire sport, save for a handful of people, is that the NCAA tournament should not expand. And if we all had it our way, I would say it should go back down to 64, but I know cat's out of the bag now. You're not going to take it from 68 to 64. 68 is fine. But have you heard anything more? I remember the last time we talked about this on the possibility of NCAA tournament expansion, because I would like to think that our voices were heard by the committee a few weeks ago, that they decided against expanding, at least for this season. They kind of kicked the can down the road a little bit.
I don't know anything more than you know. I don't know anything more than you know, Paul, other than, what was stated that, not this year. I just have to believe that it's tied to television, largely. When they can work it out between the NCAA, the television partners, the opportunity to expand incrementally. The concept ties back to the NCAA's transformation work. And you've heard me talk about this before. Getting into the Division I NCAA basketball tournament is the highest bar in any professional or major sport in the United States. Every pro sport, about 50% of the teams get into the postseason. In NCAA Division I basketball, it's the top 13% get at-large bids. That means there's a lot of good teams that don't get in. And so we discussed that in the transformation work at the NCAA level. And could you come up with a kind of a common band? And the number we came up with was, can about 25% get into the postseason? Doesn't have to be all NCAA tournament, but do the opportunities exist? So that's where, Fox's new tournament, the NCAA owns the NIT now, which could be improved as far as structure. But that's the concept behind it, where the idea of how many teams, and it's a fair conversation, how many teams should get into postseason. I mean, again, in college football, it's harder not to get into a bowl game than it is to get into a bowl game. Things like that,
When I look at the NCAA tournament, and again, this is just the last thing I would say on this, is I truly believe there is some validity to the statement that the tournament's popularity fits on one piece of 8.5 by 11 paper. And it sounds so simple to say, but being able to fill out a bracket and keep college basketball right on the forefront of people's minds for those 3 weeks in March, when there's really not a whole lot else going on in the sports calendar, right? NBA and the NHL are wrapping up the regular season. The Masters is right around the corner. You own a month. And watering that down or changing the way that even the casual fan is able to consume what is the best event in sports, to me, seems counterintuitive to what college basketball is doing right now. And I think I understand where you're coming from with the getting people into the postseason. Totally understand that. But I truly do think there is just something about filling out a bracket on one piece of paper and seeing that in front of you.
I don't disagree with you. And again, we can quibble whether it's 13%, 25%, somewhere, in between. It is, the concept and how the tournament, functions, it really is magical.
Yeah, it is.
And that you don't want to lose that. And certainly fun to certainly be a part of it, and the excitement for the university around that and the energy is pretty special.
So are there, out of all of those legal things that we just talked about, are there any big picture items for Xavier fans to know about going into the next couple of years? Maybe any predictions you have for how this will go and how this will affect?
I have no predictions.
Okay.
House is done. So we are in this revenue sharing era. Watching what plays out with the SCORE Act is going to be really important over the next few months, because what I didn't say earlier, and is worth saying, why do you need the SCORE Act or something like the SCORE Act? There are still 3-4, I forget the exact number, lawsuit or court cases working their way through the system tied to employment for student athletes. And I don't have a strong feeling which is better, a congressional solution or full-on employment. Because I can sit here and make arguments for either side. one of the two is going to happen over the next few years. Either, again, Congress will provide an overlay and a structure for college athletics, or there will be a point in time where I do believe student athletes will be employees of the university. And again, can Xavier handle that? Can Ohio State handle that? Probably, yes. But think of Mount St. Joe, think of Thomas More, because up until now, the courts have said a basketball player at Mount St. Joe is the same as a basketball player at Xavier. There's 4,000 plus universities in the United States, and probably half of them use athletics for enrollment purposes. If they woke up tomorrow and more than 50% of their students were employees, that could change higher education in the United States.
Deer Park Roofing has been providing elite service for homes and businesses since 1996 and leads the industry in professionalism, quality, and responsiveness. So whether your needs are residential or commercial, Deer Park can handle any job and ensure it's done right. Deer Park's motto is protect what's important, and what's important to you is important to Deer Park Roofing. Visit deerparkroofing.com today. deerparkroofing.com.
We're going to get into more of this as the show goes on closer to the end of the show, but I want to take a step back here and want to talk about a couple of new hires that are here in the athletic department. So we're going to talk about the fall sports teams, but Richard Pitino was not the only coach that you had to hire here. So women's golf has a new coach. Just take us through some of the new hires that you've had to make.
You're right. We've got 3 new head coaches total. There's Richard, Brittany in lacrosse, and then Stephanie Young with women's golf. So excited for all 3. Each sport's in a little different place. Brittany comes to us from St. Mary's in Maryland, and has a strong background at 2 institutions, 2 Division III institutions, and building programs. And then Stephanie was at the University of Idaho, but I worked with her at Bowling Green. She was our women's golf coach at Bowling Green. So excited to bring her back from the West Coast, so to speak, and get her back to Ohio.
What are some of the common threads you find between whether it's men's basketball or any other sport here at Xavier when you have to hire a head coach? What are some of the things that you look for?
There's some common threads about the type of human being or person you're looking for. But then again, I said this, maybe a minute ago, each sport really is in a different place in what they need and so what we're looking for. So we try to step back anytime we have a head coach opening, because again, I've used this a lot and I don't mean to overuse it, but probably one of the most important parts of my role is hiring good people and then allowing them to run hard and run their programs or run their areas. So you have to focus really hard when you have these opportunities on getting the right person. So we try to step back and identify what are the priorities for this program right now in this moment. And at that point, then you never get a perfect match, but you're trying to align it, from there. And look, it's very different. Lacrosse, golf, men's basketball, the public setting, around those programs, and then what the coach has to go through. But otherwise, search processes are pretty straightforward.
It'll be a couple weeks before this episode airs, but for right now, we're about a month into the fall sports season, and we've already started to see some success. Women's soccer with a win, a statement win over the 17th ranked Michigan State Spartans a couple of weeks ago. It was a 5-2 win, I believe.
Yep.
Just a really, really nice win for Dean Ward in that program. But already fall sports getting off to a good start.
Yeah, everybody's off and running, and again off to. I think each coach would say, whether it's Christy, John, Dean, or Sam, would say they're off to a really solid start. Most notably Dean with what women's soccer's done on a national level, and then Christy's off to a really hot streak with volleyball as well.
Yeah, volleyball. It feels like now in the last couple of seasons, really starting to kick into gear. A very experienced group this year for Christy, and I believe they got off to a 6-0, 7-0 start before they dropped one. But first couple of weekends
had a nice weekend last weekend.
And that's absolutely right. All right, let's transition here to basketball. Women's basketball, as you've heard throughout this episode, I probably should have mentioned this a minute ago, but women's basketball is practicing behind us. So that is what you have been hearing in the background as we record this up here in the ProLink Club at Center Court inside the Cintas Center, if you're listening to this in audio form. But women's basketball practicing behind us. Billy Chambers back for another season this year to lead this program. Where is that program in their rebuild?
I think they made, you watched them a lot last year, Paul, and you could watch them for 10 or 15 minutes and realize they were better than Billy's first year. The frustrating thing last year was you didn't see the results, even though they statistically, got better. So they obviously won some non-conference games, still really struggled in conference, but then finished with a really nice win against DePaul in the Big East tournament. So you felt like last year was kind of a half a step forward. The question this year is, can the team take a full step forward? And, between the pieces they were able to retain, and then the players that they've added, I know Billy's really confident going into this season.
Yeah, it feels like the coaching staff for women's basketball, it's like international recruiting. They've really gone after international recruits. You've seen that in some of the talent that has made their way to Xavier. Do you feel like with where women's basketball is right now, and really the growth of the sport too, that you can see it trending in the right direction, like you said?
Program-wise or the sport overall?
I think Xavier's program combined with what I feel like is a boom of the sport of women's basketball right now.
There's no doubt. I mean, I think, program-wise, I believe in what Billy's doing and the incremental growth that we'll see. Do we have the resources in place to be a Big East champion, at Xavier right now? I don't know that we do. But you don't go from 11th to 1st without going from 10 to 9 to, so forth. And Billy understands that and understands that expectation. So can we incrementally grow with women's basketball? And the answer to that is yes. Yes, I also think women's basketball in the United States is at a point, especially with the growth of the WNBA, has seen some real strides in the last few years. But don't also lose, I think I saw the stat pretty recently, the volleyball actually overtook women's basketball or girls basketball at the high school level in participation in the United States. So it's not just basketball. Softball's ratings are off the charts. You've seen that from an NCAA standpoint. It's really women's sports in general. There's been a lot of growth in the United States.
On the men's basketball side, we've talked about this team being entirely new, right? Roddy Anderson is back. He was a scholarship player last year, but he did not see any time because he redshirted. So Xavier men's basketball has 0% returning scoring from last season. And for what Richard Pitino needs to do this year with the talent that he has, I mean, you are starting from truly ground zero to build this back up. That is a hard task for anybody to do. How do you start, and what are the expectations for men's basketball this season?
Well, our expectations don't change, but then there's also reality, and I don't know that anybody knows the reality of this team, right now. You can come watch us practice, as you do, and until you start playing teams in other uniforms, it's really hard to know what you've got. And so I think it'll be fascinating to see the variance in predictions with this team, because the uncertainty, again, even within this building of what do we have? What do we have? So, but it's going to be exciting to watch. And again, he took a different approach It would have been real easy to come in here and say, hey, I just want to bring in a bunch of old guys, and but he really believes in this concept of the same thing he did at New Mexico. Even in an NIL era, I can keep a core group together, and he proved that at New Mexico. So this team, as you have well seen, we've got some seniors and some older guys. But there's also a core group of younger guys on this team.
How do you balance the patience of understanding that and recruiting and getting younger players, maybe even high school players, that you want to balance the expectations in year one, which is always to make the NCAA tournament at Xavier, versus understanding the vision longer term in an NIL era where it feels like, at least on the outside, it's easier to win immediately than it ever has been. All of that is in play at the same time.
It is, and that's a fair way to put it, and it is a balancing act. But here's what I would say to that is you have to believe in what Richard's been able to do before. And I also believe the last part, which I didn't say earlier, he really believes, and I agree with this, you can't do what we are doing this year every year. You can't change a roster over 10, 12 guys every year and expect any kind of success. I think that's unrealistic.
When he was hired, and I went back and really dug through, because I would stay up, I would watch New Mexico games. I've shared that on the show before. I loved watching Mountain West basketball, mostly because I'm always awake and I'm always watching the games. So if it's on, I'm watching it. And I watched a lot of Richard Pitino basketball. And to me, one, the style is very fun to watch. But two, when you really dig into his career and you see what he did in just the 1 year at FIU, and then to go to Minnesota and to turn that program around. And I know it didn't end the way he would have hoped that it ended, but it was at one point the Big Ten Coach of the Year, made multiple NCAA tournaments, had a lot of success for a Minnesota program that is, I'll say it, not one of the top jobs in the Big Ten. I don't think there'd be any argument about that. And then to go to New Mexico, where it didn't have a great first year, but then won 2 Mountain West championships in the last 2 seasons because his vision paid off. He built, there was patience, and they got there. And to me, that is extremely impressive, and it would be encouraging for any Xavier fan listening to this to see that going forward. Is that a large part of the reason why you hired him? It
is. We talked, you're right, Richard kind of landed on my radar, frankly, for his work at Minnesota. And you just outlined, kind of a summary. It's a hard place to win consistently, and he was able to. But then to go to New Mexico, which is a good Mountain West job, as you know, but then build it, sustain it in an NIL era, style of play, all those factors, come together.
What attracted you to hiring Richard as a person when you talk about, hiring the right person as well as the right coach from what you said a minute ago? What kind of person was he to you? Is he to you?
Look, we got to know each other in 48 hours? Between phone call and who knows how many actual hours it was we spent between phone calls and meeting at his home in Albuquerque. So a lot of it is the prep work ahead of time. And anyone I've ever talked to in this industry about Richard, who's worked with Richard, we'll talk about him in really positive terms. As a again, person to work with, human being, collaborative, authentic, genuine, and also really good coach. And at a place like Xavier, which is very relationship based, those qualities go a long way.
Just personally, I got to ask you this, Craig. This is the third men's basketball coach that you've hired. You hired Travis Steele, you hired Sean Miller, now here Richard Pitino. How aware are you of what people are talking about online as to your physical whereabouts during the coaching search? Because there is nothing funnier to me than trying to play flight tracker on, is he in Cincinnati or is he here? And there are reports of other candidates being available for the job, and Now all of a sudden you're in Albuquerque and Richard Pitino is the head coach.
Yeah.
Are you aware of that at the time? Or
In the middle of it? No, I barely have time to check social media on a good day, let alone in the middle of something like that. But I usually hear stories about that conjecture and questions like that after the fact.
Sure.
And yeah, some of it's funny.
Deer Park Roofing has been providing elite service for homes and businesses since 1996 and leads the industry in professionalism, quality, and responsiveness. So whether your needs are residential or commercial, Deer Park can handle any job and ensure it's done right. Deer Park's motto is protect what's important, and what's important to you is important to Deer Park Roofing. Visit deerparkroofing.com today. deerparkroofing.com.
Let's talk here as we wrap up this show toward the end. Let's talk more about Xavier and how it relates to the Big East. And I want to ask you about the Big East's new TV deal because there are a lot of new partners involved. Mm-hmm. Turner is now involved. Peacock and NBC have expanded their relationship. ESPN Plus is now on the table. Just how does this TV deal affect the Big East?
It's positive is the short answer there, Paul. There's no doubt we still, as a league, have the best television deal in college basketball as far as the national footprint for our games. And so revenue increase, exposure nationally is unparalleled. What I can even as a fan myself trying to consume games, and it's not just us.
Yeah.
It's NFL, it's NBA, it's MLB. Boy, it's getting harder, to keep track of what channel I got to watch a game on. And that, I sympathize with our fans on that. And, but that's also that's college. It's not just college sports. That's sports, right now being, breaking up into, hey, you got 4 different platforms now, 4 or 5 that you got to keep track of this year.
ESPN Plus is one big one that I think caught a lot of people's eye, and I think that will do wonders for the visibility of Olympic sports.
Yes.
And that's really the primary partnership of this is the Olympic sports visibility, but there will also be games that don't end up on linear television that go to ESPN Plus on the men's basketball side. Can you tell us more about what kinds of games might end up there? I mean, I don't anticipate that St. John's and Xavier ends up on ESPN Plus, but can you just tell us more about that?
No, we, for the first time this year, because we did have these multiple partners, we got a word, I think it was about a week before the schedule got released that, hey, schedule's done. But now because we have these multiple partners, for the first time, those partners, you've heard about this like in the NFL or the NBA, they essentially did a draft of our games as far as, who wants what games. And without getting into the gory details, ESPN Plus, I think largely will end up being those guarantee games in November and December.
Expansion for the Big East? I know that's always
never say never. I guess I don't see it as a near term. Everything that's been talked about out there publicly is out there. I do think we've gone from any kind of expansion conversation to what I'll call more scenario planning. If this happens around us, how do we react? Or if this happens, what can we do proactively? As disruptive as you think college athletics is right now, I think the window from about 30, 31 to mid to late 30s will be more disruptive because of the TV deals that are coming up. So how do you prepare yourself for this next window?
There's, I believe, I don't know if this is finalized yet, an additional game next year. You go to a 32 game schedule. Is that final? Is that sealed? Yep. I know it's been talked about. I couldn't remember if it was approved. So 32 game schedule next year?
32 game schedule next year. So we're trying to talk, Richard, Mario and I are talking, how do we want to approach that? What are is it one more home game? Is it another home and home? Is it another neutral site event? There really aren't too many incentives to continue playing in MTEs anymore, because getting to 31 games was tied to playing in an MTE. Now, with the congestions you have scheduling wise in November and December, there's still maybe a reason to go to an MTE just so you can package 2 games in 3 days. So we're having those conversations right now. What does it look like? Do not be surprised if 32 turns into 35.
Really?
Or some other number.
Would that be starting the season a couple weeks, or like in October? Or
I think it's all those types of conversations of what's the footprint of college basketball. But look, revenue has never been more important. How do you get more revenue? More content. And so that probably means, and I'm not saying anything that hasn't been discussed publicly,
sure,
but I just think at some point 32 isn't the ending point.
Well, if we ever need more content, I mean, I'm always happy, with more games. That gives us more content. Yeah. It just feeds everybody. So I'm all for that. Let's take off the athletic director hat for a second, put on the vice president hat for a second on the university side, with a lot going on, obviously, on the university side. The College of Medicine has been discussed extensively here. That's set to open in the next couple of years.
First class in 27. Yep.
First class in 27. What are some of the big, university issues, priorities, things happening right now?
Well, you just named the largest, the College of Medicine, which as you drive by on Dana Avenue is coming along, and it's 2 or 3 stories up at this point, and coming along real nicely. The other big one is just enrollment on campus. And President Hanich has done a really nice job navigating us, through this post-COVID era and kind of the beginnings of the, kind of the change in enrollment for high school, seniors coming, and changing the whole strategy about how we approach undergraduate enrollment. And it's not always pretty in how we're approaching it, but as far as getting from point A to point B, but really confident with where we are. I think this will get publicized more, as the fall goes through, but we've had a really nice increase in retention on this campus. The shape of this year's freshman class, as far as the quality of freshmen, both economically and then also their academic background, has taken some nice steps. Now we got to get the size of the class, correct. And as we analyze this past class, there were some, I'm not going to call them easy fixes, but there were some obvious fixes and obvious changes that are being made right now. And a lot of it comes down to some, what I'll call old-fashioned marketing and kind of funnel approaches. So the early indicators for next August class are already trending in a really positive direction. So macro-wise, enrollment, College of Medicine. Yep.
On the enrollment side, I remember hearing even years ago, even talking back to COVID, just projecting out this year's freshman class, because as hard as it is to believe, this was the freshman class coming out of the recession in 2008. Yeah. So there are quite literally less human beings this college age to go to school. Combine that with the fact that higher education in general has never been, at least in recent memory, it's at a really tenuous spot with just kids deciding, maybe I don't want to go to school or pay this number and find myself in debt and go to college. So how do you all try to combat that and still make Xavier appealing for an 18-year-old that wants to go to school?
Those are the exact conversations we've been having, over the last, say, 12 to 24 months, especially as we go through this transformation work on campus, Paul. And that's such a longer conversation.
Sure.
Try to distill it into, like a 30-second answer.
It's probably not a fair question for me to put you on the spot to ask. But
it is because that gets to the root of who is Xavier, and instead of trying to be all things to all people, we've spent a lot of time getting focused on where does Xavier stand out. And look, I'm going to guess most of the people watching this are Xavier alums. How does Xavier stand out? It's about relationships. It's about community. It's about that full development. It's about the values of this institution, the faith-based piece that wraps around all of it. That is how we can stand out. That is how we can distinguish, this institution. And again, we've made some really nice strides just in the last 12 months in anchoring around those areas. So now you got to do some fine tuning around what I'll call the volume of the funnel, and things will be in a really good place.
I'll just leave this up to you here. Football, is it happening ever?
Yeah. Talk about the number of questions I get. That still is at the lead.
I'm trying to eliminate the questions in the future because I think I know the answer here.
It's still an idea. And it's an idea that works. Again, we talked a lot to the Valpos, the Butlers, the Daytons of
Pioneer
the world.
League.
Yeah, the Pioneer League. On paper, the program makes a lot of sense for a place like Xavier. Our issue continues to be we don't have a stadium. And so as that idea and the College of Medicine idea and a bunch of other ideas came out of the strategic plan when Dr. Hanich first arrived, at the end of the day, we talked them through, and the College of Medicine was the higher priority to be using debt capacity to build a facility. That was the right decision. It doesn't mean football's no longer an idea or that football will never happen. So it's sitting there on the idea board. I don't have any kind of timeline for it, though. Yeah.
I'm not going to be doing play-by-play of Xavier football in the next
Not in the next couple of years. We do have a club program.
That's true. That is true. Yeah. Anything else on the capital campaign front, athletics, any big picture items?
So athletics or sports in general, because along with rec sports, club sports, and the 19 varsity programs will be a big part of the upcoming capital campaign, and the priorities for this program continue to be the same. I mean, I say this often, Richard, myself, others who work in this department, we're stewards of your programs. But the reality is the resources we have is how far Xavier basketball, Xavier any sport is going to go. So the environment has changed. And there is a higher expectation for more resources going, especially to the basketball programs. So that request for and need for increased support is only going to continue at least for the next year or two as we figure out what exactly the ecosystem is.
One more question on that. How do you, when you look at non-men's basketball, right? You look at soccer, you look at baseball, on-campus sports, and women's soccer, men's soccer's had a lot of success. Women's soccer nationally ranked as we're sitting here talking. Baseball has just blossomed in the last few years under Billy O'Connor, who he himself is an alumni and would die for that program. Yep. And is there ever a conversation with those coaches about, building a baseball stadium into the Hill, or is, building a bigger soccer facility, or do you talk to those coaches and they say, if we're going to spend money, let's just put it into NIL?
So those conversations have shifted, and again, much longer conversation, but over the last, say, 12 to 24 months, as NIL's become a little bit more of a reality of, is it always the facility that's the highest priority? But I would say for each sport, we always have a list of facility priorities, operating priorities, scholarship priorities, so that we know, depending on the donors or alums that we're talking to, where would the interest be in supporting a program. So, in the past, especially for basketball, do you have the right coach? Do you have the right budget? Do you have the right facility? That's what you needed. Now, revenue sharing is a component of that. So it's a big part of how we're approaching things.
Last question here. I always leave it open-ended. Any big picture items the next 3 to 4 years, anything that we haven't covered that Xavier fans, or really anybody listening to this, should be aware of?
No, you've covered all the ground, so I don't think there's anything that hasn't been covered here. I guess what comes to mind, Paul, is because you do hear this, whether it's at events or even in the aisles at Kroger, oh my God, things are changing so much, yes, college athletics is changing dramatically. And again, that's exciting. It's terrifying, whatever word it is you want to use. I think we're navigating it. But just because college athletics is changing, there's also a lot about Xavier that isn't changing. And so what Xavier is and what Xavier can do for its student athletes, what Xavier does for the community that comes here 18 times a year to be together, that's not changing. So it's up to us to adapt to the new landscape. And this place has done that before. With some hard decisions, adapting in the early to mid 70s as far as changing away from football, adapting and getting ready and preparing to be a part of the Big East and doing what was necessary there. So I'm highly confident in this university's ability to step up, to navigate, to adapt, whatever words you want to use. It just, everybody, let's stay focused on this is what we need to do. And I know it can be done.
Greg, I appreciate you taking an hour here to sit down and catch
Thank you,
up.
Paul.
It's great.
Appreciate what you do for the programs.
Well, I'm always happy to be around. And like I said, always happy to create content. Whatever you all need, I'm here to do it. I appreciate you taking some time here, and hopefully all of you listening and watching this enjoyed an update here on the athletic program, the Xavier, the university as a whole. Make sure if you haven't already, you subscribe to the channel where you're watching right now or you're listening in audio form, all of that good stuff. Thanks as always to our partners at Deer Park Roofing. I'm Paul Fritschner, signing off. The season right around the corner. Men's basketball, November 3rd, opening night. Hard to believe how quick it's coming up, but it'll be here before we know it. Thanks for watching and listening, everybody, and we'll talk to you next time on The Pitino Show.